The bank called on Tuesday morning. Tom Henderson had 60 days to come up with $47,000 or lose the farm his grandfather built in 1922. Tom sat at the kitchen table, the foreclosure notice shaking in his hands. His wife Sarah poured coffee but didn't say anything. They both knew their 40 acres of corn and soybeans weren't going to save them. This is a work of fiction set during the mid-1970s. While characters and events are created for storytelling, they reflect documented farming experiences and historical economic conditions of that era. Tom walked out to the barn and looked at his International Harvester 656 tractor, sitting there like a monument to failure. He'd bought it used for $8,500 3 years ago, thinking bigger equipment meant bigger profits. His neighbor, Dale Kruger, had just purchased a brand new John Deere 4430 with 125 horsepower for $28,000. Dale farmed 2,000 acres of corn. "You're too small to compete," Dale had told him last month at the co-op. "Either buy more land or get out." Tom had tried to buy more land, but ground was selling for $2,400 an acre, and the bank wouldn't loan him another dime. His corn yielded 98 bushels per acre last season. At $2.30 per bushel, he'd grossed barely $9,000 after all his costs. The math didn't work. Sarah found him in the barn that evening. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know yet," Tom said. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about his grandfather's stories of the Depression, how they'd survived by selling vegetables door to door in town, how people always needed to eat, no matter what. The next morning, Tom drove to the University Extension office in Cedar Falls. A young agronomist named Philip Chen sat behind a metal desk covered with papers. "I need to make real money on 40 acres, Tom said. "What can I grow that's worth something?" Philip leaned back in his chair. "Vegetables. Direct market them. Cut out the middleman." "Everyone says vegetables are too much work." "They are," Philip said. "That's why most farmers won't do it. But an acre of tomatoes can gross $8,000 if you sell them right. Your 40 acres of corn grossed what? $200 an acre after costs." Tom felt something shift in his chest. Hope, maybe, or desperation. He spent the next week reading everything Philip gave him. Commercial vegetable production guides, market gardening manuals from the 1950s, budget spreadsheets that made his head hurt. The numbers looked impossible and possible at the same time. 1 acre of sweet corn could gross $3,500, green beans $4,200, tomatoes up to $8,000. But the startup costs were brutal. Irrigation equipment $6,000, transplants and seeds $2,800, a used vegetable planter $3,200. "We don't have this kind of money," Sarah said, looking at his notes. "We don't have a choice," Tom replied. He sold the International Harvester 656 for $6,800. He sold his grain drill for $1,100. He sold every piece of equipment designed for commodity farming. His neighbors thought he'd lost his mind. Dale Kruger stopped by one afternoon in March 1976. "Heard you're planting vegetables." "That's right." "You know how much work that is? I can plant 500 acres of corn in 3 days. You'll be hand-picking tomatoes all summer like some kind of migrant worker." Tom didn't answer. He just kept sharpening his hoe. With the equipment money and a small loan from Sarah's uncle, Tom bought a used Rainbird irrigation system and 10,000 tomato transplants. He planted 5 acres of tomatoes, 3 acres of sweet corn, 2 acres of green beans, and 2 acres of cucumbers. The rest stayed in regular corn to hedge his bets. The work nearly killed him. He was in the field by 5 a.m. every morning, hand-watering transplants, weeding rows on his hands and knees. Sarah helped when she could, but she was still working her job at the hospital to keep their health insurance. By June, the tomato plants were blooming. Tom had never paid attention to tomato flowers before. They were small and yellow and seemed like promises. Then the cutworms came. He walked the rows one morning and found dozens of transplants severed at the base, just cut clean through and left to die. He'd lost maybe 800 plants in one night. Tom sat down right there in the dirt and put his head in his hands. Sarah found him there an hour later. "Get up," she said. "Replant them. We still have transplants in the greenhouse." It took him 4 days to replant the damaged rows. His back screamed. His hands developed blisters that popped and bled and turned to calluses. But the plants grew. By mid-July, he had ripe tomatoes. Beautiful red Better Boy tomatoes that weighed a pound each. He picked 200 pounds that first day and loaded them in his pickup truck. The problem was, he had no idea where to sell them. He drove to the grocery store in town. The manager looked at his tomatoes and shook his head.
"We get our produce from Cisco. Can't help you."
Tom tried 4 more stores, same answer. He was about to give up when he saw people at the farmers market in the town square. About a dozen vendors selling from card tables and truck beds. He pulled in and started asking questions. An older woman named Betty Mueller sold flowers from her garden. "You need a vendor license," she said. "Costs $25 for the season. Market runs Saturday mornings, 7 to noon." The next Saturday, Tom backed his truck into a spot at the market. He hand-lettered a sign on cardboard. "Fresh tomatoes, $1.50 per pound." By 9 a.m., he'd sold out, all 200 pounds. He made $300 in cash. He went home and picked more tomatoes. The next Saturday, he brought 400 pounds, sold out by 10 a.m. The Saturday after that, 600 pounds. People started asking when he'd be back. They told their friends. By August, Tom was picking tomatoes every single day. He'd wake at 4 a.m., pick until 7 a.m., then spend the rest of the morning at one of 3 farmers markets he'd found within 50 miles. The afternoon was for watering, weeding, and dealing with problems. The green beans came on strong. He was picking 300 pounds every other day and selling them for $1.25 per pound. The sweet corn was ready in late August, and people bought it by the dozen ears at 25 cents each. Sarah started helping on Saturdays. She was better with customers than Tom was. She smiled more, remembered names. People bought extra vegetables just to talk to her. In September, Tom sat down with a calculator and added up the numbers. The 12 acres of vegetables had grossed $41,000. After costs for seeds, transplants, irrigation and fuel, he'd netted $28,000. His 28 acres of regular corn made $3,200. He paid the bank $20,000 against the loan. The remaining $27,000 would have to wait, but at least he'd bought time. That winter, Tom couldn't stop thinking. If 12 acres made that much money, what could he do with all 40? Dale Kruger stopped by in February 1977. "Heard you did all right with your garden." "Did okay," Tom said. "I planted 2,200 acres last year," Dale said. "Corn hit $2.10 a bushel. I grossed over $400,000. Tom didn't mention his costs were probably $350,000. He just nodded. "Thing is," Dale continued, "I'm looking at a new combine, the John Deere 7700, $48,000, and I need another 1,000 acres to justify it. You interested in selling?" "No," Tom said. Dale looked surprised. "You could clear your debts, start over somewhere." "I like it here," Tom said. After Dale left, Tom made a decision. He was going all in on vegetables. He planted 35 acres of vegetables that spring, 5 acres of tomatoes, 4 acres of sweet corn, 3 acres of peppers, 3 acres of green beans, 2 acres of cucumbers, 2 acres of squash, 2 acres of melons, and 14 smaller plots of specialty crops like herbs, lettuce, and root vegetables. The work was insane. He hired 2 high school kids to help with weeding and picking, paid them $3.50 an hour. Sarah quit her hospital job to run the markets full-time. By midsummer, they were harvesting something every single day. Tom built a small packing shed with a walk-in cooler. Cost him $8,000, but it meant he could store produce overnight and maintain quality. The markets were going well, but Tom realized he was leaving money on the table. Restaurants. He put on his cleanest shirt and walked into Antonio's, the nicest Italian restaurant in Cedar Falls. The chef was a man named Marcus Boyd, who trained in Chicago. "I grow tomatoes," Tom said. "Better than anything you're getting from your distributor." Marcus frowned. "My distributor is reliable. You might have tomatoes this week and nothing next week." "Try them," Tom said. He brought a basket of his best tomatoes. Deep red, still warm from the sun. They smelled like summer. Marcus sliced one open, tasted it. His expression changed. "How much?" Marcus asked. $1.20 a pound. I'll deliver twice a week." They shook hands. Within a month, Tom was delivering to 5 restaurants. The chefs loved having local produce. They put it on their menus as a selling point. Fresh from Henderson Farm became something people looked for. The money was better than the markets. Steadier. He could plan around it. But in August 1977, everything almost fell apart. The irrigation system broke. A main line cracked and flooded 2 acres of peppers before Tom found it. He called the repair company. They said it would cost $4,200 to fix and take 2 weeks to get the parts. Tom didn't have 2 weeks. He had crops dying in the heat. He spent 3 days digging up the broken pipe himself. Drove 2 hours to Des Moines to find the parts at a supply house. Installed the new line working by flashlight until midnight. The peppers survived. Barely. Sarah found him asleep in the truck the next morning, still covered in mud. "You can't do this alone," she said. "I know," Tom said.
He hired a full-time worker named Ray Patterson.
Ray was 55, had farmed corn his whole life, and was willing to learn vegetables. Tom paid him $12,000 a year, plus a share of the profits. Ray was slow but steady. He learned to recognize ripe tomatoes by touch, could tie up tomato plants faster than anyone, didn't complain about the heat or the long hours. That fall, Tom's gross revenue hit $94,000. Net profit was $53,000 after all expenses. He paid off the bank loan completely. For the first time in 4 years, the farm was free and clear. Sarah cried when he showed her the final bank statement. "We did it," she said. But Tom wasn't satisfied. He kept thinking about scaling up. The next spring, 1978, he made a decision that seemed crazy. He was going to build a greenhouse. Not a small one, a real commercial greenhouse, 30 feet by 96 feet, with propane heat and automated ventilation. The quotes came back at $18,000. "That's most of what we made last year," Sarah said. "We're buying transplants for 30 cents each," Tom said. "I can grow them for 8 cents, and we can start earlier, get to market 2 weeks before anyone else, charge premium prices." They built the greenhouse in March. Tom did most of the work himself with Ray's help. They poured the foundation, erected the frame, installed the poly covering. It took 6 weeks of brutal work, but it worked. That spring, Tom started his own transplants. 15,000 tomato plants, 8,000 pepper plants, thousands more of herbs and specialty crops. He sold the extras to other gardeners for 50 cents each and made $4,000 just from transplant sales. And he was at market 2 weeks before any other vendor with ripe tomatoes. He charged $2 per pound, and people paid it gladly. First fresh tomatoes of the season were worth it. Dale Kruger stopped by that summer. He didn't look as confident as before. "Corn's down to $1.95, Dale said. "Costs keep going up, but prices keep falling. I don't know how much longer I can do this." Tom didn't gloat. He just nodded. "How much you making on your vegetables?" Dale asked. "Enough," Tom said. Dale looked at the fields of tomatoes, the workers picking beans, the truck loaded for market. "You were right," he said quietly. "I was wrong." It was the closest thing to an apology Tom would ever get. By 1980, Henderson Farm was grossing $140,000 a year. Tom had 4 full-time employees and a dozen part-timers during peak season. He'd bought a refrigerated delivery truck for $22,000. He was supplying 15 restaurants and had a waiting list of others who wanted to buy from him. Sarah ran the business side completely now. She handled ordering, scheduling, payroll, and customer relationships. She was better at it than Tom ever was. They built a farm stand on the property, a simple wooden structure with a covered area and displays. They opened it Thursday through Saturday during the growing season. People drove from 40 miles away to buy directly from the farm. The work was still hard, still endless. Tom was 42 years old, and his body hurt every morning. But it was different than before. He was building something instead of just surviving. Then, in 1983, the bottom fell out. The worst drought in 50 years hit Iowa. By July, the corn in the surrounding fields was brown and dying. Dale Kruger's 2,000 acres yielded almost nothing. Tom's vegetables suffered too, even with irrigation. The well water wasn't enough. He was running the irrigation 18 hours a day, and the plants still wilted in the 105-degree heat. The tomatoes developed blossom end rot. The peppers were small and bitter. The sweet corn didn't fill out properly. His production dropped by 60%. His revenue fell from $140,000 to $65,000. But vegetable prices skyrocketed. Nobody else had fresh produce. Tom's tomatoes that normally sold for $1.50 per pound were selling for $4 per pound. The restaurants were desperate for anything fresh. He ended the year with $58,000 in profit, down from previous years, but still positive. Still enough to pay his people and maintain the equipment. Dale Kruger sold his farm that fall. Couldn't make the loan payments. A corporate farming operation bought his 2,000 acres for $1.8 million and folded it into a 10,000-acre operation. Tom went to the auction where Dale sold his equipment. The John Deere 4430 that cost $28,000 new sold for $9,500. The $48,000 combine went for $14,000. Everything was worth a fraction of what Dale had paid. Tom bought a used Ford pickup truck for $2,200. That was all he needed. The next few years were steady, not spectacular, but good. Tom refined his systems. He learned which crops were most profitable per acre, which restaurant clients were most reliable, which market customers would buy year after year. He started growing specialty items that few others bothered with. Heirloom tomatoes,
Asian vegetables for the growing immigrant community,
edible flowers for the fancy restaurants. In 1989, Tom had a thought that surprised him. He was happy. He was 48 years old. His back hurt, and his hands were permanently stained and calloused. He worked 6 days a week from March through October, but he loved it. Sarah was happy too. She'd found her calling in running the business. She was good with people, good with numbers, good at seeing opportunities. Their son David was 19 and had just finished his first year at agricultural college. He'd spent the summer working on the farm and seemed to actually enjoy it. "You think you might want to do this?" Tom asked him one evening. "Maybe," David said, "but different. I've been reading about organic certification. People will pay more for organic vegetables." Tom smiled. "Tell me about it." The farm continued to grow. By 1995, they were grossing $220,000 a year, with net profits around $95,000. David came back after college and started transitioning fields to organic production. It took 3 years to get certified, but the premium prices made it worthwhile. They built a second greenhouse, started doing winter production of lettuce and herbs using grow lights, found new markets in Des Moines, and even shipped to Chicago restaurants. The 40 acres that almost got foreclosed in 1976 became worth $8,000 per acre by the late 1990s. Not because of the land, but because of the business built on it. Tom Henderson turned 65 in 2006. He still worked every day, but left most of the decision-making to David. They had 12 full-time employees now, 3 greenhouses, a processing facility for making salsa and pickles in the winter. Revenue over $400,000 a year. One morning that fall, Tom walked through the fields alone. The tomatoes were still producing in late September, heavy red fruit hanging from the vines. Workers were picking beans in the next field over. The farm stand had a line of customers waiting. He thought about Dale Kruger sometimes. Dale had died in 2001, never farming again after he'd lost everything. His 2,000 acres had made him feel big and important, but they'd also made him fragile. Too much debt, too little margin for error. Tom's 40 acres had seemed like failure at first. Too small to matter, too small to compete. But small had let him change direction quickly. Small had let him build relationships with customers. Small had let him experiment and adapt. Small had given him control. He didn't regret any of it. Not the hard work, not the risk, not even those desperate early years when failure seemed certain. Sarah called from the farm stand. "Tom, you got a minute? Customer wants to talk to you about heirloom tomatoes." "Coming," he said. He took one last look across the fields. 40 acres of vegetables growing strong in the September sun. Small by most standards. Perfect for him. He walked toward the farm stand, his boots crunching in the gravel, ready to talk about tomatoes.